Hello and welcome to Inside Report. I'm your host, Bruce Schlussman. With me today we have Congressman Gohmert, who's here to speak to us about the border and his Mueller report. Thank you so much for coming.
Well, thank you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the border, what's been going on. It kind of seems like things have been silent. We were at a huge moment where there were all these caravans coming and, a lot of detentions, and there was a media circus around that, and then just everything went dark. So what's happening right now?
Well, the one thing that hadn't gone dark is people coming into the border, and they're coming in daytime, they're coming at night. I've been down there a lot of times all night long, and that's when most often you would see people coming in. The coyotes acting for the drug cartels would bring them in when they were told to. But that has not stopped. It has continued unabated. And just in the last couple of weeks, we've had a bill that the Democrats brought to the floor that goes way above and beyond DACA, and it would pragmatically allow gang members to come in unimpeded. It is just incredible. The amendments Republicans tried to make to clean it up and to protect our country, Democrats voted them down one after another. And as I said on the floor during debate, every time, a Border Patrolman make this clear, every time that anybody in Washington talks about amnesty, legal status, DACA, any of these dreamers, it encourages thousands upon thousands to come flooding into the United States. And they're not all people that just want a good opportunity. You got gang members. Just in the last 10 days or so, we had the biggest group from Africa we've ever had, 116 in one group, not just one or two blending in, 116. I mean, they're coming from around the world. We're on track now to have the largest group come in illegally ever. It's just incredible. And the things that we're doing here in Washington are doing nothing but encouraging more people to come in illegally. The crisis has not abated despite what the president's tried to do, and he had a victory here in recent days with Mexico saying they're going to help out and they're going to try to stop people from coming across Mexico into the United States. But if we could just get Mexico to enforce their own immigration laws, I mean, they're pretty draconian immigration laws. I looked at making a bill some years back that would have the United States immigration laws mirror those in Mexico. There are some that are so draconian we couldn't do, but just to be strictly enforcing our borders, you either go to jail or get thrown out, and there are no releases on your own recognizance in Mexico. But just to wake Mexico up as the president has now and get them to start enforcing their laws and trying to prevent people just parading through Mexico would be a big deal. It's against Mexican law to come across the country for the purpose of coming to the United States. They just hadn't enforced it. So, and as I've told the president and part of Border Security Caucus and the Freedom Caucus, we've talked about this numerous times. From my experience, the best thing we could do immediately, and we wouldn't even have to do this in Congress, because every immigration judge is simply appointed by the Attorney General. We should set up big tents. We could use trailers, we've still got trailers around from Hurricane Katrina. But bring tents, whatever we got to do, to the border. And I don't mean, 200 yards from the border. Bring them right to the border. And somebody comes across and claims asylum, you walk them right into the tent, and they stay there until they have their hearing. And then 95% that do not get the asylum because it's not legitimate, you take them right back across. And one other thing though, and I've been advocating, talking about this since I was a felony judge in Texas, until the border's secure, it is ridiculous to talk about dreamers, DACA, amnesty, legal status, any of those things, because it doesn't matter. I mean, I've sentenced people to prison who ended up, right after they went to prison, ICE finally took them and deported them. And one guy said, "How did you get back to my court so fast? I sent you to prison." He said, "Well, as soon as, shortly after he got to prison, ICE came and got him out and took him to Mexico." I said, "So how did you get back here?" And he said, "Well, as soon as they drove away, he came right back across the border." I mean, this is insanity. You secure the border, then we can work something out about people that are here. But once people see they're not going to be released for 4 years on their own recognizance, so 95% don't come back for their hearing, they stop coming. It slows the flow to a trickle.
So backing up to what you said about Mexico and this new deal, just for a minute, is there a question of whether Mexico even has the ability to enforce kind of its own draconian border laws?
They have the ability. It's kind of like a comedian said when he was told you have the right to remain silent. He says, I know I've got the right, I just don't have the ability. But Mexico, they actually have the right legally. They do have the ability. Mm-hmm. But from a practical standpoint, the drug cartels have so much control in Mexico that they're not going to want to see that enforced. We were told a couple of years ago that the drug cartels were probably making around $80 billion or so off the sale of drugs brought into the U.S. illegally. And now, though, with all the money they're making from people coming into the United States illegally, they have an incredible business model because people don't come into the United States without paying something. And I've been there at night when when our Border Patrol would ask, how much did you pay the drug cartel, the coyote, the gang? Sometimes gangs bring them in on behalf of the drug cartel. How much did you pay to come in? And it may be $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. And then where did you get that kind of money? Well, normally the answer is, well, we were able to come up with 1,000 or 1,500, and then somebody from the U.S. sent 1,000. And so where's the rest of the money coming from? And the answer normally is, they're going to let us work it off when we get where we're going. So basically, their business model has become, they have future employees paying them for the chance to go to work for them free to the drug cartels. They're not going to pay them. And then they're working for free. And as I've told repeatedly, the drug cartels look at our Homeland Security as their logistics. The drug cartels get them across the border, and then Homeland Security and HHS ship them wherever the cartels want them to go in the country. So they set up shops for drugs, sex trafficking, whatever, with the help of Homeland Security or Health and Human Services. So they're making a tremendous amount of money. The drug cartel, they do not want to see this stopped. So it's going to take a lot of courageous people. We need somebody in Mexico like Uribe was in Colombia. We helped Uribe, but the guy was fearless, taking on the drug cartel, the FARCs, down in Colombia. We just haven't had anybody like that in leadership in Mexico. And as we've seen, anytime you hear somebody who is an official, elected official in Mexico say, we don't need a secure border, we don't want a wall, you can take it to the bank, they're making money from the drug cartels.
So moving ahead to the Mueller probe, which kind of seems like all anyone ever talks about these days. So it's over, but Attorney General Barr announced there may be an investigation of the investigators. What do you think that looks like? And where does the Mueller probe go from here now that it's over?
Well, it should go nowhere because, the job of a prosecutor is to search for evidence to support probable cause a crime was committed and who probably committed the crime. And if you get that evidence, you take it to a grand jury, you get an indictment. And if you don't get to that level, of probable cause that a crime was committed and probable cause this person committed it, then it comes to an end. No prosecutor is ever hired to exonerate anybody. And so for Mueller, of course, I've known the guy since when I first got here in 2005. And I gave him a softball questions, at least the first time that I questioned him. But then when I started finding out from FBI agents all the damage he was doing to the FBI, and then you start seeing the improprieties in which he was engaged as head of the FBI, I quit asking softball questions. This guy did more damage to the FBI than anybody, including J. Edgar Hoover in his later years. So, and he had no conscience at all about destroying the lives of people like Stephen Hatfield that he accused and just relentlessly pursued, destroyed his life, harassed neighbors, had everybody hating Hatfield as the guy that caused death of people with anthrax. He didn't. And even, it's reported, even President Bush called him in and said, doesn't seem to be any evidence against this Hatfield guy. Are you sure you got the right guy? 100%. When it turned out it wasn't him, Mueller said he had no apologies to make, that he didn't do anything wrong. He destroyed life. He destroyed Ted Stevens' life. The senior Republican senator, he was from Alaska, and the FBI they fabricated a case against this guy. Kurt Weldon was accusing the FBI of sitting on information from a program called Able Danger that if they had pursued it, they could have stopped 9/11. And I thought at the time when Kurt Weldon was making those speeches condemning the FBI, well, gosh, Mueller's got to come back and respond. This is really serious. Well, he didn't respond publicly. He just had the FBI raid Kurt Weldon's daughter's law office, and they of course leaked to the media when they were doing it early morning, and there were plenty of people out protesting that very morning his office. So that was 2 weeks before the election. He narrowly lost the election, and it became clear to me, Mueller did respond. He destroyed another man's life. This is who he is. And even when it was clear that 4 guys had been sent to prison, they weren't good guys, but they were sent to prison from Boston for killing a man. Even after Mueller knew, everybody knew these were not the guys that committed the murder, Mueller still writes to the parole board and demands they not let him out. This is not a guy that I would want anybody to emulate in law enforcement. He destroyed the FBI by running off thousands and thousands of years of experience. I mean, I know enough about the guy when I heard other Republicans saying, well, he's the gold standard when it comes to law enforcement. I'm going, these people don't know this guy. And everything he was doing in the early days totally supported my views of the guy. We've never had a special counsel that hired people that hated the subject of an investigation. And you had Strzok, you had Page. He didn't fire them when he found out about their hatred and bias against President Trump. He only fired them when it was clear information about their texts were going to come out. So he finally had to let them go. But he hired people that he knew hated the president. So from day one, it was clear this was not a guy that was on a mission for justice. It was a guy on a mission for revenge and vengefulness. And, that's obvious from the fact that, just a day before, he's begging the president to make him director of the FBI again, and Trump turns him down. And apparently they'd had some business problem. I'm not sure what that was, but he should never have taken the job as special counsel. He should have recused himself. He was disqualified on a number of levels. The Justice Department does not allow somebody to prosecute or pursue a case if their close friends are involved as witnesses, which is exactly what Comey was. And there's an article doing an expose on Mueller and Comey. He said basically they're joined at the hip. They're always going to be lifetime friends. And Comey was a central witness, and he jumps on and it immediately takes the case as special prosecutor, where he knows his buddy Comey is involved. And we know from Comey himself that I believe he certainly violated the law when he leaked information so that, in his own words, that they could get a special counsel, and that special counsel was his close best friend forever, Mueller. I mean, there's just so many things about it that stunk to high heavens. So I was talking to Sean Hannity, or texting back and forth, and I said, I want to do an op-ed to let people know about Mueller. But normally they don't want an op-ed that's more than 800 words, and I'm at 2,000 words. And Sean texted, he said, you just go ahead and write whatever you need to write, and we'll put it up. We'll do an interview. Put it up on my website, and then people can just download it, and we'll get it published that way. And so as a result of that, not only did Sean have it on his website, I did interviews all over the country, and usually that radio station or that radio show would put it up on their website. I have no idea how many times the article's been downloaded and read, but I encounter people around the country that said, thank you for exposing Mueller for the guy he really is. So there was no good that was going to come from that. When I would be on Fox over that 2-year period, I kept explaining he's not going to close this up anytime soon. Yeah. And a year and a half ago, people were saying, well, it's probably going to be done by summer. It's probably going to, then later, well, it's going to be done by September 1. I'm going, you guys don't know Mueller. He is not going to shut this down early. He's going to at least take it through the election November 2018, and he will continue to drag it out as far as he's allowed to keep dragging it out, even though there's nothing there. And sure enough, that's exactly what he did. He clearly affected the November 2018 election. He had an impact. That was his intent. This is not a guy that needs to be glorified. He's a guy that was involved as part of a coup to take down a sitting president. And thank God we had an attorney general come in who looked at the evidence and realized this needs to stop. I don't know if Barr said something to Mueller, but I think it's terrific that finally we had an end to what Mueller would have drug out on his own through 2020. I'm sure if he possibly could have.
Yeah. So you mentioned your report, obviously, like the thing with Hannity, a 48-page Mueller unmasked, really hard-hitting stuff, and you've mentioned a lot about it just now. But I want to go back to Mueller's team that he selected.
Yes.
So he selected Peter Strzok. He selects these people, particularly Weissman.
Yes.
Would you tell us a little bit about Weissman and kind of the rest of the ensemble, and why he would pick people who are so obviously biased against the person they're supposed to be investigating?
Well, in Weissman, he got a twofer. Not only a guy that hated Trump and loved Hillary Clinton, but he also had a guy who was known for being ruthless and acting in illegal ways to pursue people that should never have been pursued. I mean, Weissman is credited with basically destroying one of the finest accounting firms ever in history, Arthur Andersen. And there were apparently a few people there that should have been held responsible for not acting appropriately. He took down, intentionally and knowingly, took down the entire firm. All of those people at Arthur Andersen could have sued him and gotten every penny he could ever make, except he was doing it under the cloak of the Justice Department. So there was no way to sue him for his impropriety. But when you have decisions by the highest court, Supreme Court, come back 9-0, destroying the injustices that Weissman did, it should be a clue to any potential future employer of Weissman as a prosecutor that this is not somebody that should ever be allowed the cloak of the federal government in going after people. But knowing Mueller, that's exactly why he wanted him. He wanted people destroyed like he had already seen done with Ted Stevens, Hatfield, and so many others. That's what he wanted. That's why he hired him. That's why he was his number one guy. And I didn't even mention the fact that you had Rosenstein as a U.S. attorney and Mueller, head of the FBI. Weissman also involved in investigating what we now know was Russia's illegal effort to obtain United States uranium. And instead of blowing the lid off all that illegality, they force their inside guy that's been doing tapes and giving them information, they force him to sign a non-disclosure agreement under threat that they'll prosecute him if he breathes a word about it. I've never heard of that. I mean, for heaven's sake, yeah, I can see a non-disclosure agreement until the prosecution's finished. But even then, you should allow the defense to talk to potential witnesses. But it didn't matter. They wanted information about Russia's true illegal efforts thwarted, silenced, so that the sale could go through of U.S. uranium so it could end up in the Russian hands, which then resulted in $145 million or so going into the Clinton Foundation from people from Russia profiting from that deal. And of course, you know, Bill Clinton made $500,000 for a quick speech. But to me, it was more having investors in that uranium sale or purchase that were giving money to the Clinton Foundation, when she had a voice as a cabinet member in what happened there.
With Flynn, you talked a bit about Flynn and that whole debacle that happened and his handling and possible mistreatment, and eventually led to a guilty plea. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, when you have the federal government with its trillions of dollars of resources, and you come after an individual, you can destroy them. That's why we have to be so careful in who we put at the head of the Justice Department. And of course, President Obama was not too careful about that. And so we end up having Eric Holder. We don't know the extent of any involvement in Fast and Furious, which resulted in murder, and thousands of guns being put in the hands of people that were criminals, should never have been allowed to have them. That was his watch. Maybe he had something to do with it, maybe he didn't. We won't know because of all that was slow walked and then destroyed in the way of ability to get to the bottom. How did those guns get in wrong hands? And we know the Justice Department forced the sale of weapons to people that should not have gotten them. But then you have, really, you look at the prosecution of Michael Flynn, guy that served his country honorably and well, 30 years or so. And apparently they were investigating him. They had him targeted. They were listening in. And, you know, they come after a guy, and according to the two FBI agents that interviewed him, there was no deception indicated. And I know you've heard of people referring to perjury traps. If you go talk to a guy and you ask them about things, conversations you have recorded, you're setting him up for a perjury trap. So if he remembers anything differently from what you have on tape, you can go after him. But these guys felt like he made an honest mistake, that it was not intentional. But since his memory was not perfect, they came after him for making a false statement to FBI agent. It's kind of like the FBI did with Martha Stewart and with Scooter Libby. When they couldn't prove a crime that they went after them for, then they found somebody that had a different version of what they said, and so then they'd come after them. So it's what they did to Flynn. He had no choice. As I understand it, they were also threatening to go after and destroy family members. And that's when a patriot like Michael Flynn would say, I'll plead guilty, leave my family alone.
Christopher Steele dossier is obviously a hot topic with Mueller, and kind of seems to be at the center of a lot of the way they got warrants and they got kind of the casus belli to just continue with this investigation. Do you want to speak a little bit about the Steele dossier and how involved was it in this Mueller probe?
Well, we knew that it probably went to the heart of the FISA warrants.
Yep.
And that was basically admitted early on. Then some would back off and say, oh no, there was plenty of other evidence. But it turns out, as best we can see, and we'll know more soon when the FISA material all comes out, but you have this so-called dossier. And dossier used to have more of a legitimacy to the sound of the name. Now it's more of a pejorative, a way to, that's why I've referred to the Mueller report a number of times as the Mueller dossier, because it has about that much credibility. By the way, on the Mueller's report, I knew, I've been saying since day one, even if he can't find anything to go after President Trump on, he will include information in a report to try to make people hate President Trump, to cast him in the worst light possible. He's not going to put any information in that's exculpatory, that makes him appear innocent. He will only put in things that try to make him look bad. It's exactly what he did. That is not a prosecutor's role. But when it comes to the Steele dossier, here you have a foreign agent, kind of a former foreign agent working for Great Britain, and he gets hired by Fusion GPS on behalf of the Clinton campaign, maybe the DNC too. But, and then we're finding out now also he was getting paid by the FBI and the Clinton campaign through Fusion GPS. They're paying him to come up with trash, opposition research, which in this case was just nothing but trash, to trash Trump, a guy that he made clear he hated. But this is a foreign agent. And under FISA, if someone is dealing with a foreign agent, then that can be the basis of getting a warrant from the FISA court. If you have contact, so if you had contact with Christopher Steele, that might have been a basis for them getting a FISA warrant to surveil you. But this was turned upside down. You have the Clinton campaign, Fusion GPS, dealing with a foreign agent, and they're using that to get a warrant against the Trump campaign. And clearly people were set up. From what we know is finally coming out. So Steele is getting in contact with people he didn't know, he had not met. He's finally admitted, that he didn't know who these Russians were, but it's possible they could have been agents for Vladimir Putin. So who was colluding with the Russians to try to affect the election? Clearly, the Democratic Party, Hillary Clinton, Fusion GPS, and they had compromised the intelligence community. This is something we've still got to learn. You got Clapper and Brennan out there flapping in the breeze. But now we're hearing there probably was a relationship between the CIA and other intelligence like MI6 in England, where, under American law, we're not allowed to spy on American citizens. So how about you spy on an American citizen for us and give us the information? We'll spy on a British citizen for you and we'll just swap out. Sounds like these may have been the way they were doing business. And then they get the Australian ambassador involved so that he provides a low-level Trump campaign person with the line, gee, apparently Russians have Hillary Clinton's emails. And then they set him up to have somebody ask him, hey, you know anything about Hillary Clinton emails? Well, I hear the Russians have got them. Well, he was fed that line now at the behest of the Democratic, well, at least the Clinton campaign. And then he's set up to be asked about it on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the FBI. And they go after this poor guy for no reason. Carter Page, Papadopoulos, these guys were set up. And it looks like they used at least foreign intelligence officials, maybe former, to try to set them up. And then there was nothing verified about the Steele dossier. Steele released information to a reporter, or at least an official, apparently Michael Isikoff, I believe, and gets a story in the media about this collusion with Russia, and then they use what Steele leaked, though false. They use that to say, see, this verifies the dossier that Steele prepared. They lied repeatedly to the FISA judge. I've been a felony judge reviewing applications for warrants and affidavits in support of applications and warrants, and sometimes you turn them down because you can't just have conclusions in an affidavit and application. You've got to have facts. And if anybody had ever come to me and sought a warrant and knew information they were providing was false by omission and false by inclusion, and they didn't tell me as the judge, somebody's going to jail for committing a fraud on my court. And the fact that we've gone all this time now and no FISA judge has had the gumption to put people in jail for committing a fraud on our courts, it tells you either one or more FISA judges were part of this attempted coup, intentionally and knowingly, or they are such pitiful federal judges, they have no business being on the bench because they have no problem being lied to by people that come before them seeking orders. So either way, we have got to have a total revamping of the FISA court. I wouldn't mind seeing it go away. A lot of people around here feel so strongly we can't let that happen. But something's got to be done. When you can bring this little experiment in self-government we have after over 230 years to the brink of destruction, where one political party can use the intelligence community, the Justice Department, State Department, all these things, use foreign governments to try to defeat a political opponent, we're on the brink of losing everything. If Hillary had been elected, as Newt Gingrich has said, we would never have known how weaponized and co-opted intelligence and justice had become. We knew the IRS had been weaponized, but we didn't know it about justice and intelligence. So now the biggest tragedy taking place at this time is the fact that I have friends on the Democratic side who used to care about privacy issues, who used to care about Fourth Amendment rights and improper search and seizure. Not only do they not care, they're all in defending what happened, just with everything they can use to defend it. It's really outrageous what's going on.
So what can groups like Judicial Watch do about it, who've been involved in kind of trying to get to the bottom of this matter?
Judicial Watch, you know, my heroes. And what they've been doing has done more good than any of the committees that we've had investigating things here. And that's through the Freedom of Information Act requests. Through FOIA, Judicial Watch has been able to get material that committees here have not been able to get. And I know we had Benghazi committee that was looking into that, and I got a. I hope Tom, you can ask Tom if he doesn't want it in. You can edit it out. But I'm in a judiciary hearing, and so I step out and talk to Tom, and he said, "We have tens of thousands of documents that we've gotten only because of a court order and threatening the Obama administration. We've got information the Benghazi committee has never gotten. And he said, I've been trying to get it to them for months. They won't return my calls. They won't respond. And they're supposed to be investigating Benghazi. We got information they need to see, they need to know. And they won't even, not only have they not gotten it, they won't even let us give it to them. And if something doesn't, if we are not allowed to provide them all these thousands of documents we have, they don't have, then I'm going to have a press conference and I'm going to out how weak and pitiful the Benghazi committee has been. They're not trying to get at the truth, they're just a show, unless they start accepting the things that we have they haven't gotten. And so I went and spoke to one of the members of the committee and told him what Tom had said. And later that day, committee staff accepted the things that Judicial watched. I mean, thousands and thousands of documents. And some of them were emails and documents that were really critical. But it was only Judicial Watch that got them. And without, I just bring that up, if it's allowed to be in, just to show how important Judicial Watch has been. Without them, these committee investigations that actually have had even limited success would not have without the great work of Judicial Watch. So please keep that up.
Absolutely, and thank you for saying that, and thank you for walking us through your very thorough report on Mueller, kind of which is called Mueller Unmasked if our audience wants to download it on Hannity's website. And
it's on my Twitter, at Rep. Louie Gohmert. It's also Gohmert.com. You can download it there. But people need to know this is not, apparently he fought honorably in Vietnam, and I appreciate his service there, but I do not appreciate the plots he's been a part of in what I would consider immoral, unethical efforts to get a man he didn't like.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for walking through with us and being on this episode.
No, thank you.
Absolutely.
It's really been my pleasure.
Absolutely.
Love being with you. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Inside Report. If you support our work, please visit our website, donate, check out more episodes we have there. Please like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitter, and of course, follow us on Instagram. Thank you so much for joining us.